In a forgotten corner of the world, where maps faded into soft parchment mysteries, lay the Valley of Eventide. It was a place untouched by the hurry of kingdoms or the clamor of ambition, a gentle fold in the land where time itself seemed to breathe more slowly. Here, the sun did not set with a dramatic clash of color, but rather retreated with a soft, golden sigh, melting into horizons of lavender and dusky blue. The forests were not wild tangles, but ordered groves of ancient, benevolent trees, whose leaves whispered secrets only the wind could understand. Brooks chuckled softly over smooth stones, their music a constant, soothing refrain that wove through the meadows where silver grass swayed in hypnotic, languid waves. This was a land built not for waking life struggles, but as a cradle for rest, a natural sanctuary, where peace was as tangible as the morning dew. The people of Eventide were reflections of their home. They spoke in measured, melodic tones, their movements graceful and deliberate. They were farmers of calm and weavers of serenity, their days following the gentle rhythm of the sun and their nights dedicated to the sacred, shared act of dreaming. They believed, as their ancestors had, that their valley was a soft place where the veil between the waking world and the realm of dreams was at its thinnest and most tender. Their most important figure was not a king or a warrior, but the Keeper of Eventide, a guardian chosen for the profound stillness of their heart, whose sole duty was to maintain the balance and ensure the gentle flow of dreams into the world. For generations, this duty had fallen to the line of Alara, a wise woman who lived in a cottage woven from living willow and stone. At the valley's heart, her presence a constant, calming hum in the land's quiet song. On this particular evening, as the first star, Vesper, kindled its soft light in the violet sky, a subtle discord stirred the valley's harmony. Alara, seated on her moss-covered doorstep, felt it, not as a sound, but as a shift in pressure, a faint chill in the warm twilight air. The stream nearby seemed to hesitate in its chatter. The fireflies, usually drifting in lazy, glowing constellations, blinked erratically. She closed her eyes, extending her awareness along the invisible threads that connected all things in Eventide. The disturbance was faint, coming from the north, from the direction of the silent mountains, a place of towering, snow-capped peaks where even the winds were hushed. It was not an attack, but a slow creeping emptiness, a quiet place where dreams were being gently unraveled before they could form. A deep, resonant concern settled in her bones. The balance was fragile, and this stillness was not one of peace, but of absence. She knew then that the current keeper, her grandson, Leo, who was on a solitary walk along the mountain paths, would need to understand this new silence. Leo was a young man whose spirit matched the valley's deep tranquility. He carried the title of keeper in weight, not with pride, but with a profound sense of quiet responsibility. He learned the old songs that could soothe the restless animal, the herbs that brewed into sleep-inducing teas, and the stories, passed down through countless generations, that were themselves doorways to gentle slumber. He was walking a high mountain trail, a ribbon of pale dust against dark rock. As the last light faded, he felt the change to a sudden, deep quiet that went beyond the natural hush of evening. It was as if the very potential for sound had been leached from the air. Looking towards a distant pass called the Sleeper's Gate, he saw not a physical threat, but a gathering of shadows that seemed to drink the starlight. His heart, usually a steady drum, gave a soft, apprehensive flutter. The path ahead was no longer just a walk. It was a calling. With a slow, deep breath that steadied his spirit, he adjusted the simple wool cloak around his shoulders and began his descent towards the source of the silence, each step measured and calm, his quiet mind already reaching out to listen to what the new emptiness had to say. The journey down from the mountain path was a transition from crisp, thin air to the deeper, fragrant breath of the pine forests that cloaked the lower slopes. Leo moved without haste, his footsteps silent on the bed of fallen needles. The unsettling quiet persisted, a bubble of absence in the world's gentle soundtrack. He paused by a familiar ancient pine, its bark gnarled and wise, and placed a palm flat against it. In his mind, he sent a simple, wordless question, a feeling of concern and request for understanding. The tree's response was slow, a deep, earthy feeling of disturbance from further down the valley, near the old dream well, a sacred spring, said to be a direct tear of dream stuff from the other realm. The feeling was not of malice, but of a deep, lethargic cold, a forgetting. Thanking the tree with a soft press of his hand, Leo continued, his direction now clear. The night deepened around him, but in eventide, darkness was not frightening. It was a soft blanket, a velvet cloak embroidered with starlight. The moons, twin sisters named Lula and Nox, rose together, casting a gentle, blue-silver glow that made the world look like a half-remembered, beautiful dream. As he neared the grove that housed the dreamwell, the quality of the silence changed. It was no longer just an absence of sound, but a presence of its own thick, muffling stillness that seemed to press against his ears. The usual guardian animals of the grove, the wise old owls and watchful deer, were absent. Even the insects were mute. Pushing aside the curtain of hanging willow branches that marked the entrance, Leo entered the sacred space. The dreamwell was a small, perfectly circular pool, its water so still and black, it looked like a hole in the world, reflecting only the twin moons directly overhead. But tonight, the reflection was wrong. The moons in the water were fractured, their light dim and diluted. A thin, faint mist, not the usual gentle vapor, but a cold, gauzy shroud, clung to the water's surface, leaching the warmth from the air. Leo knelt at the pool's edge, feeling a profound sorrow emanate from the water. The well was not poisoned. It was falling asleep itself, and its dreams were turning gray and hollow. The balance was tipping from tranquility into void. He knew then that this was not something he could mend with a song or herb. The source was elsewhere, and the mist was merely a symptom. He would need to follow the cold thread back to its origin, a journey that would likely lead deep into the heart of the silent mountains, to places even the keepers rarely walked. Back in her willow cottage, Alara felt Leo's realization as a ripple in the valley's quiet consciousness. She stirred a pot of simmering lavender and chamomile over her low fire, the fragrant steam coiling in the air. She had feared this day might come. In her oldest scrolls, written in fading ink on vellum made from lamb skin, there were mentions of the slumber-mist, a phenomenon not of nightmare, but of dreamless sleep, a creeping nothingness that could, over decades, leave a land hushed and empty, its people awake yet never truly resting, their inner lives fading to gray. It was said to begin in places of deep, forgotten sorrow. The silent mountains held many secrets, and among them, she recalled a legend of a fallen guardian, a keeper from ages past, who had succumbed to grief and fallen into an eternal, lonely sleep, his unchecked sorrow perhaps festering into this mist. Leo's path was set. He would need more than his quiet heart. He would need the ancient tools of the keepers, tools of comfort and remembrance, not of war. Rising slowly, she moved to a carved oak chest at the back of her cottage, its surface worn smooth by time. Inside, wrapped in undyed linen, lay a cloak woven from shadow and starlight, a lantern that burned with captured moonlight, and a small, simple flute carved from a single piece of heartwood. These were not weapons, but guides. She laid them out by the fire, ready for when he returned. The cottage felt very still, the weight of the sleeping valley resting softly on her aged shoulders as she waited, listening to the gentle crackle of the fire, and the distant, softened call of a night bird finding its voice again, far from the mist. Leo returned as the first hint of pearl-gray light touched the eastern sky. He entered the cottage, the coolness of the grove still clinging to his clothes. Without a word, he sat by the fire, holding his hands out to the warmth. Alara handed him a cup of the steaming tea. "The dreamwell is fading," he said, his voice a low murmur that matched the fire's whisper. "It's not sick, it's forgetting how to dream." Laura nodded, her wise eyes reflecting the flames. "You felt the cold thread. The source lies in the mountains, in a place of old sorrow. The slumber-mist awakens, or perhaps refuses to wake." She gestured to the items laid out. "You must follow the thread, Leo, but you go not as a warrior to fight, but as a healer to listen. The cloak will help you pass through shadows without disturbing them. The lantern will light your way without breaking the night's peace. The flute," she paused, "the flute is for speaking when words are too loud. It sings the old language of stream and wind, the language a sorrowful heart might still remember. Leo looked at the humble tools, then at his grandmother's serene, worried face. He felt no fear, only a deepening of his quiet resolve. After drinking the tea, which spread a wave of gentle warmth through his core, he gathered the items. The cloak settled over his shoulders with the weight of a soft breeze. The lantern glowed with a cool, reassuring light, and the flute felt alive and warm in his hand. As the true dawn began to paint the sky in soft pastels, Leo stepped back out into the valley of Eventide, turning his face towards the imposing, silent peaks. His journey into the quiet heart of the mountains had begun. The foothills gave way to steep, winding trails strewn with sharp shale and ancient, weathered rock. The air grew thinner and cooler, but the strange, muffling silence of the mist receded here, replaced by the natural, profound quiet of the high places. Leo walked for hours, his pace steady and mindful. He followed the feeling, the faint, cold pull in his chest that led him away from the known paths used by shepherds. He navigated by the sun's gentle arc and the subtle signs in the landscape, alike in pattern pointing the way. A series of stones that seemed placed, not fallen. The mountains were not hostile, but deeply contemplative, demanding a matching inner silence from those who walked them. As he climbed, he practiced the art of moving without intrusion, of being a part of the landscape rather than a traveler through it. The moon lantern remained unlit, its light unnecessary under the sun, but its presence was a comfort. By midday, he reached a high alpine meadow, a surprise of emerald green and wildflowers nestled between granite giants. A crystal-clear stream, fed by melting snow, giggled its way across the stones. Here Leo rested, drinking the icy water and eating some of the journey bread Alara had packed. He closed his eyes, listening. The cold thread was stronger here, a palpable chill emanating from a narrow, shadowed cleft in the rock face at the meadow's far end. This was the path. Finishing his rest, he approached the cleft. It was just wide enough for a person to pass through, and from it breathed an air much colder than the surrounding alpine chill, the specific, dream-emptying cold of the Slumber-Mist. The cleft opened not into a cave, but into a hidden, descending canyon, a secret world within the mountains. The walls rose sheer and smooth, as if carved by a giant's careful hand, and the floor was a soft carpet of silver moss that absorbed all sound. Here, the Slumber-Mist lingered in tangible drifts, pulling in corners like liquid twilight. The air was frigid and still. Leo lit the moon lantern. Its beam did not cut aggressively through the gloom, but pushed it back gently, creating a sphere of soft, silver light around him that seemed to hum a barely audible tone of comfort. He wrapped the star cloak tighter around himself. It held his body's warmth close and seemed to blend his edges with the shadows, making his passage even more silent. The canyon wound deeper, the only sound the soft crush of moss under his boots and the quiet, rhythmic sound of his own breathing, which he deliberately kept slow and deep. Strange, frozen formations lined the path, not ice, but crystallized mist, capturing phantom shapes that might have once been leaves or birds in mid-flight. It was a gallery of stillness. The cold thread in his heart was now a taut line, pulling him forward with increasing urgency. He knew he was getting close to the heart of the emptiness, the source of the mist that threatened his peaceful valley far below. He paused, not from fatigue, but to center himself, to ensure his own inner quiet was strong and unwavering before proceeding into whatever lay ahead. The narrow canyon finally opened into a vast, cavernous space, so large its ceiling was lost in darkness. But this was no ordinary cavern. In its center lay a still, black lake, its surface perfectly mirror-like, reflecting not the unseen ceiling, but a field of frozen, unmoving stars. Around the lake's shore were structures not built, but grown, or perhaps dreamed, from the very stone, arches that curved like sleeping brows, pillars that resembled stilled waterfalls, and benches that looked like petrified clouds. This was a forgotten sanctuary, a temple to rest built by hands or minds long gone. And at the far side of the lake, on a low dais, a figure sat slumped in a stone throne, shrouded in the thickest concentration of the Slumber-Mist. Leo approached slowly, the moss giving way to smooth, cool stone. As he drew nearer, the moon lantern's light fell upon the figure. It was a man, or had been, clad in robes that might once have been gray or blue, now faded to the color of ash. His head was bowed, his hands resting on the arms of the throne, and over him swirled the mist, pouring from him in a slow, relentless exhalation. This was the source. The sorrow was palpable here, a deep, ancient ache that hung in the air like a chord from a broken harp. Leo felt no fear, only a profound, empathetic sadness. He stopped a respectful distance away, set the lantern down so its light created a gentle pool around them both, and waited. He did not speak. He simply stood, a quiet presence in the vast, sleeping hall, and listened with his entire being to the silent song of the guardian's grief. Time lost meaning in the timeless cavern. Leo stood, a statue of patient compassion, as the mist swirled and the frozen stars glimmered in the black lake. He opened his senses fully, allowing the guardian's sorrow to wash over him, without being swept away by it. In the quiet, impressions began to form, not words, but feelings. Images faded like old frescoes. He saw a younger version of this guardian, a keeper like himself, standing proudly in a valley more beautiful than eventide. He felt the warmth of connection, of love for the land and its people. Then came a shade, not of evil, but of a great, slow change, a glacial shift, a climate turning colder over centuries, the people having to leave, the valley dying despite his care. He felt the crushing weight of helplessness, the guilt of a guardian who could not guard, the loneliness of being the last one left, the final witness to an ending. The sorrow had been so total, so absolute, that the guardian had not raged or wept. He had simply feasted. He had sat down here, in this last beautiful, hidden place, and let his grief become a silence so deep it stopped his own heart and dreams, bleeding out as the slumber-mist. He wasn't creating it. He was trapped within it, a dream of grief, dreaming itself eternally. Understanding bloomed in Leo's quiet mind. This was not a battle to be won, but a knot of frozen sadness to be gently warmed, acknowledged, and finally released. Slowly, Leo moved. He did not approach the throne directly. Instead, he walked to the edge of the still, black lake. He looked at his reflection, holding the moon lantern aloft, seeing his own calm face superimposed over the field of frozen stars. He then did something simple. He knelt, and with his free hand, he broke the perfect surface of the water. The ripples spread out in slow, perfect circles, distorting the reflection, setting the captured stars in gentle motion. The sound of the water's displacement was a soft, liquid whisper that echoed strangely in the silent cavern. He then brought out the heartwood flute. Putting the lantern down, he raised the flute to his lips. He did not play a melody, not at first. He simply breathed into it, a long, soft note that held the sound of a sighing wind through eventide's pines. He followed it with another, lower note, the sound of a distant stream over stones. He played the quiet song of his home, the rustle of silver grass, the patter of gentle rain on broad leaves, the deep hum of the earth at rest. The notes were soft, unhurried, and they did not attack the silence. They simply existed alongside it, offering an alternative. He played of dawn's gentle light, of the comfort of a hearth fire, of the safe, deep darkness of a loved one's arms in sleep. He played, not to overwhelm, but to remind. A change began, so subtle, it was almost imperceptible. The thick, pulling slumber mist around the throne seemed to quiver. One of the frozen, crystalline formations near Leo's feet gave a soft ping, and a hairline crack appeared, a tiny droplet of liquid light welling up within it. The note of the flute was doing what time alone could not. It was reaching through the layers of frozen grief with the persistent, gentle warmth of remembered beauty. Leo continued, his eyes closed now, pouring his own quiet love for eventide, his gratitude for his role, his understanding of the guardian's loss, into the simple, wordless song. He played of cycles, of how even in endings, there are seeds for beginnings elsewhere, of how a guardian's love does not die with the place, but transforms. He played until his breath was steady and deep, and the song became as natural as breathing. When he finally lowered the flute and opened his eyes, The cavern was different. The mist was still there, but it was thinner, more transparent, and the figure on the throne had lifted its head. 2 points of faint, weary light looked back at Leo from within the deep hood. There was no menace in that gaze, only a bottomless, ancient fatigue and a glimmer of bewildered recognition, as if waking from a dream too long to remember. Leo stood and approached the dais slowly, the flute held loosely at his side. He stopped at the foot of the steps leading to the throne. He did not bow, but met the guardian's faint gaze with his own calm, empathetic one. "Your watch was long," Leo said, his voice not breaking the new, softer quiet, but becoming a part of it. "Your sorrow is known." He spoke not as a challenger, but as a successor, a fellow keeper across the gulf of time. "The valley you loved, its song changed, but it did not end. It echoes in other places now, in the brooks of eventide, in the whisper of the pines on the mountain where I walked. Your care was not wasted. It became the foundation for other peace." He extended a hand, not to touch the guardian, but to gesture to the cavern, the lake, the frozen stars. "But this is not peace. This is a memory of pain, held so tightly it has become a cage. You are remembered. You are allowed to rest." The guardian stared, the faint lights in his eyes flickering. A single, crystalline tear, not of water, but of solidified mist, traced a path down his ashen cheek and shattered silently on the stone floor. The sound of its shattering was like a tiny bell. At that moment, Leo took the moon lantern and placed it on the step between them. Then he began to speak. He did not tell a story of heroes, but a simple, soothing chronicle of eventide. He described Ilara's cottage, the children listening to tales by the fire, the farmers returning home at dusk, the way the deer drank from the dream well without fear. He painted a picture with quiet words of a living, breathing peace, a continuity of watchfulness. He spoke until his voice was a soft murmur, a lullaby for a centuries-old grief. As Leo spoke, the transformation deepened. The guardian's form began to soften, not to fade, but to become less solid, more like the mist itself. The slumber-mist pouring from him lightened from a cold gray to a soft, pearlescent white. It stopped feeling cold and empty, and began to feel like the gentle fog that sometimes rises from eventide's meadows at dawn, full of potential and soft light. The frozen stars in the lake began to thaw, their light melting and swirling in lazy, golden patterns. The crystalline formations around the cavern wept their droplets of light, which gathered and began to flow in tiny rivulets toward the lake, infusing it with a warm, gentle glow. The guardian looked from Leo to the lantern, to the changing cavern. A sense of profound release, not of defeat, but of completion, filled the space. The figure on the throne gave one final, slow nod in acknowledgement, a passing of the watch. Then he dissolved, not into nothingness, but into a cascade of that same pearlescent mist, which flowed down the days and merged with the now golden mist filling the cavern. The cold thread in Leo's heart snapped, replaced by a warm, radiant feeling of peace that was both old and new. The throne was empty. The source of the slumber-mist was gone. Its energy transformed back into simple, neutral dream stuff, harmless and quiet. The sanctuary was no longer a tomb of sorrow, but a remembered place of beauty. Finally at rest, Leo sat on the bottom step, feeling the immense, gentle silence settle around him. He was weary, but it was a good weariness. He had done his duty not by fighting, but by listening, by remembering, and by offering the simple, healing gift of a quieter, kinder story. The journey back through the canyon was different. The silver moss seemed greener, the air warmer. The mist had cleared entirely, leaving behind a clean, mountain chill. When Leo emerged from the cleft into the high alpine meadow, the sun was setting again, casting long, peaceful shadows and painting the sky in bands of rose and gold. He took a deep breath of the free, fresh air. The imbalance was healed. He made his way down the mountain paths as night fell, this time with a lighter step. The moon lantern's light was barely needed under the brilliant canopy of real, living stars. He reached the Dreamwell Grove just before midnight. Pushing through the willow branches, he saw the pool. Restored, its surface was once again a perfect mirror, but now reflected the vibrant, shimmering tapestry of the Milky Way, each star sharp and clear. The water hummed with a soft, creative energy, and the familiar guardian L was back, perched on a branch, watching him with wise, unblinking eyes. Leo smiled, a small, tired, fulfilled smile. He knelt and touched the water, sending a pulse of gratitude and the memory of the transformed mist back into the dream current. The water felt warm and vital. He returned to Ilara's cottage as the first birds began their pre-dawn chorus, a sound that now seemed especially sweet. She was waiting, a new pot of tea steaming between them. She looked at his face, saw the peace there mixed with his fatigue, and knew without being told. She poured him a cup. "It is done," he said simply, sitting heavily by the fire. "He is resting now." Truly rested, Ilara nodded, a deep contentment in her eyes. "And so must you," she said. "The keeper's final task, after a long watch, is to restore himself." Leo needed no persuasion. After drinking the tea and eating some warm broth, he retreated to his small sleeping alcove. He laid aside the cloak, the lantern, and the flute, their purpose fulfilled for now. Wrapped in his own ordinary blanket, his head on a soft pillow, he let the exhaustion wash over him. But it was not a desperate slump. It was a gentle, yielding descent. As he closed his eyes, the images of the hidden sanctuary, the thawing stars, and the guardian's final nod of release swirled in his mind, not as troubling memories, but as the closing chapters of a long, somber story that had finally found its peaceful end. His breathing slowed, deepened, sinking with the slow, steady breath of the valley outside. The last thing he felt was not the cold thread of emptiness, but the warm, golden thread of connection to Ilara, to the sleeping people in their cottages, to the deer in the forest, to the very stones of Eventide. And as he slipped into a dreamless, profound, and perfectly restorative sleep, a soft, contented sigh escaped his lips, a sound that was identical to the sigh of the wind through the willow trees outside, carrying with it the promise of sweet, untroubled dreams for all. Leo sat in the stillness, the silence now a companion rather than a void. He felt the memory of the first keeper not as a weight, but as a gentle pressure, like a hand resting on his shoulder in quiet camaraderie. The cavern, now humming with a low, warm resonance, seemed to be remembering itself. The stone arches sighed as if releasing a breath held for centuries, and the petrified cloud benches softened at their edges, their outlines blurring into the ambient light. Leo knew his immediate task was complete, but the larger work reintegrating this healed energy with the dreaming world remained. He also felt a new understanding dawn within him. The first keeper's loneliness had stemmed from believing himself the last. Leo was not. He was a link in a chain, and this realization filled him with a profound sense of connection that stretched both backward and forward in time. He gathered the moon lantern, its light now a steady, warm gold, and the heartwood flute, which felt even more alive, pulsing gently in time with his own heartbeat. As he stood, he performed one last act of ceremony. From a small pouch at his belt, he took a pinch of the silver grass seeds he always carried, the symbol of Eventide's enduring, gentle life. He scattered them at the base of the now empty throne, where the stone met the soft moss. "May your rest be fertile," he whispered, the words hanging in the air like a blessing. Then, with a final, respectful nod to the sanctuary, he turned and began the journey back through the transformed canyon, the path forward lit by a lantern that now held a fragment of two worlds, captured moonlight and released starlight. The return journey through the canyon was a slow, sensory revelation. The silver moss was now shot through with tiny, bioluminescent threads that glowed with a soft blue light, illuminating Leo's path in a gentle radiance. The crystallized formations of mist had fully melted, and in their place, delicate, unknown flowers had sprung from the canyon walls, their petals the color of dawn and their scent a light, sweet fragrance that cleansed the palate of the earlier cold emptiness. The air itself tasted different, clean, and charged with a subtle, creative potential, like the moment before a pleasant dream begins. Leo walked without hurry, allowing his body and mind to absorb the healing that had taken place. He felt the event settle within him, not as a turbulent story, but as a series of deep, resonant truths about duty, sorrow, and release. His footsteps were silent on the lush new growth, and his breathing remained deep and even, syncing with the slow, steady pulse he could now feel emanating from the very rock around him. It was the heartbeat of the mountain, no longer sluggish and trapped, but strong and free. He paused occasionally, not out of fatigue, but to simply be present, to witness the canyon's reawakening. He watched as a trickle of water, born from the melted stars of the lake, began to carve a tiny, musical channel down the center of the path. Its sound a joyful counterpoint to the profound quiet. This was the sound of life returning, not with a roar, but with a whisper, the most powerful sound of all in the grammar of Eventide. When Leo finally emerged from the cleft into the high alpine meadow, the world outside greeted him like a long-lost friend. The sun was midway through its afternoon descent, bathing the meadow in a honeyed, forgiving light. The air was crisp and vibrant, filled with the hum of bees and the distant, cheerful whistle of a mountain bird. The oppressive, muffling silence was utterly gone, placed by the rich, layered symphony of a living mountain. Leo sat on a sun-warm rock at the meadow's edge, letting the natural light wash over him, feeling its warmth seep into bones that had been cradled in subterranean coolness for what felt like days. He unpacked a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried apples from his pack, eating slowly and mindfully, tasting each flavor with heightened appreciation. As he ate, he observed the play of light and shadow on the peaks across the valley, the slow dance of clouds, the steadfast posture of ancient pines. His mind was quiet, a still pool reflecting the beauty around him. He felt no urgent need to rush back down. The valley below was safe, its equilibrium restoring itself moment by moment through the connection he had re-established. This journey was as much about his own integration as it was about healing the external malaise. He closed his eyes, facing the sun, and simply listened. He listened to the wind, to his own breath, to the faint, contented hum of the moon lantern at his side, its task nearly complete. In this space of peaceful aftermath, he understood that a keeper's power was not in dramatic interventions, but in these moments of deep, attentive listening to the land, to its histories, and to the silent songs of sorrow that needed to be heard to be healed. The descent from the high meadows as evening approached was a gradual right entry into the familiar world of Eventide. With each downward step, the air grew thicker, sweeter, carrying the distinct fragrance of evening blooming jasmine from the lower woods and the damp, rich scent of loam. Leo moved like a man in a reverie, his senses fully open. He noticed details he might have missed before, the intricate geometry of a spider's web beaded with evening dew, the precise pattern of lichen on a north-facing stone, the way the fading light turned ordinary ferns into sculptures of emerald and gold. He was seeing his home with new eyes, eyes that had witnessed the source of its potential ailment and had participated in its cure. A deep, quiet pride, free from arrogance, settled in his chest. He had held his calm in the face of ancient sadness, and that calm had been enough. As the last of the sunset's blush faded into twilight, he reached the edge of the whispering woods, the final barrier before the heartland of the valley. He stopped beneath the first great oak, its branches a protective canopy. Here, he deliberately slowed his breathing once more, preparing to transition from the solitary realm of his quest back to the communal soul of Eventide. He extinguished the moon lantern, its light no longer needed, as the twin moons, Lila and Nox, began their ascent, casting their inseparable, soft glow. He was home. The Dreamwell Grove was waiting in a state of hushed anticipation. As Leo pushed aside the curtain of willow branches, the change was immediately palpable. The pool was no longer a still, dark mirror, but a living, breathing entity. Its surface shimmered with a gentle, internal luminescence, like sunlight seen through deep water. Ripples seemed to form of their own accord, expanding and intersecting in complex, beautiful patterns before dissolving into the whole. The air was warm and humid, fragrant with night-blooming flowers and the clean, mineral scent of the spring. The guardian owl was there, but it was not alone. A family of foxes slept peacefully in a den at the base of a willow, their sides rising and falling in unison. Fireflies drifted in a slow, coordinated dance above the water, their flashes synchronized to the rhythm of the ripples. The grove was not just restored, it was thriving, vibrating with the vitality that was contagious. Leo knelt at the water's edge, as he had in the cavern, but this time his gesture was one of reunion. He placed his hands palm down on the cool, damp earth beside the pool, feeling the vibrant energy from through the soil and into his fingertips. He closed his eyes and sent a simple, wordless message and narrative of what had transpired, composed not of facts, but of feelings, the chill, the sorrow, the music, the release, the warmth. He felt the grove receive it, the water glowing momentarily brighter, the owl giving a soft, acknowledging who. The connection was reaffirmed, stronger now for having been tested and repaired. The walk from the dream well to Alara's cottage was the final leg of his long pilgrimage. The valley at night was a masterpiece of serene beauty. Cottages nestled in the folds of the land showed warm, golden lights in their windows, not the harsh glare of Alar, but the soft, welcoming glow of hearts and candle flames. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning applewood. From open windows drifted the muffled sounds of domestic peace, the faint clatter of a dish being washed, the low murmur of conversation, the soft melody of a lullaby being sung to a child. Leo absorbed it all, each sound and smell a note in the symphony of a world at rest. He felt the rightness of his path with every fiber of his being. He was not a warrior returning from a battlefield, but a healer returning from a sickbed, and the patient was recovering beautifully. As he approached the familiar, willow-woven cottage, he saw a soft, steady light from within, and the silhouette of his grandmother seated by the window, her head bowed over some knitting or mending. The sight filled him with a love so deep and calm, it was like stepping into a warm bath. He paused at the garden gate, taking one last moment to himself in the quiet night, feeling the twin moons on his face, listening to the chorus of crickets that had resumed their endless, reassuring song. All was well. Alara did not rise to meet him when he entered. She simply looked up from her knitting, her eyes meeting his in the firelight. A slow, deep smile spread across her weathered face, etching gentle lines of relief and pride around her eyes. "You've returned," she said, her voice the familiar, gravelly whisper that had told him stories since infancy. It was a statement, not a question. "The valley sings a clearer tune tonight. The weight is gone." Leo nodded, hanging his cloak on the peg by the door. The star cloak he folded carefully and placed on the oak chest, next to the extinguished lantern and the flute. They seemed to hum contentedly, their purpose fulfilled for now. He settled into the chair opposite her, the one that had always been his, and let out a long, slow breath he felt he'd been holding since he first sensed the discord days ago. The fire crackled pleasantly, and the scent of the ever-simmering herbal pot tonight, it was lemon balm and a touch of sage wrapped around him like a blanket. "He is at peace," Leo said, the words simple and final. "His watch is over." Ilara nodded, her needles clicking a soft, rhythmic accompaniment to the fire. "And yours continues," she replied, her gaze knowing. "It is different now, though, isn't it?" Leo looked into the flames, watching the logs shift and send up a shower of harmless sparks. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "It's deeper. I understand the silence behind the quiet now. I know what we are guarding against isn't noise, but the absence of song." They sat in comfortable silence for a long while, the kind of silence that exists between people who understand each other without words. Alara finally put her knitting aside and rose. Moving to the hearth, she ladled a generous portion of a rich, savory stew from a pot that had been keeping warm at the edge of the fire into a wooden ball. She placed it before Leo with a hunk of dark bread. "Eat," she instructed, the universal grammar of caregivers. The first taste was a revelation of home. The stew was thick with roots, herbs, and tender meat, its flavors deep and grounding. As he ate, the last remnants of the mountain's chill dissolved from his core, replaced by a spreading, nourishing warmth. Alara watched him, her expression soft. "You will need to tell the story," she said after he had eaten his fill. "Not tonight, and not with drama, but in the coming days, to the others." not to frighten, but to reassure. They felt the unease, even in their sleep. They deserved to know the valley's resilience and the nature of their keeper's quiet work. Leo understood. His journey was not a secret to be hoarded, but a lesson in the continuity of care. He would weave it into the fabric of Eventide's lore, a new, gentle chapter in its long history of peace. It would become one of the stories told by future keepers, a testament to the power of listening and the necessity of compassionate release. This thought did not burden him. It felt like a natural extension of the duty he had already performed. The fatigue, held at bay by purpose and calm, now finally claimed him. It was a pure, clean exhaustion that sank into his muscles and bones, promising a sleep of profound depth. He bid Alara good night and retreated to his small sleeping alcove, a niche in the cottage wall lined with shelves of books on botany, astronomy, and old tales, and dominated by a wide, low bed piled with feather-stuffed quilts and wool blankets. The room smelled of cedar, dried lavender, and the faint, comforting scent of paper and ink. He prepared for bed with slow, ritualistic movements, washing his face with cool water from the pitcher, brushing his hair, changing into soft, loose linen sleep clothes. Each action was a deliberate punctuation mark, signaling the end of the extraordinary and the return to the ordinary rhythm of his life. He placed the heartwood flute on a shelf where he could see it from his bed, a reminder of the song that had healed. Then he extinguished his small candle and slid under the heavy, welcoming weight of the blankets. The darkness in the alcove was absolute and velvety, a private cocoon within the sleeping cottage. He lay on his back, staring up into the darkness where he knew the ceiling to be, and let his body settle. He felt every point of contact between himself and the bed, every slight ache from the journey, every whisper of the linen against his skin. He focused on these sensations, anchoring himself firmly in the present, in the safety of home. As he lay there, the events of the past days began to replay in his mind, not as a stressful reel, but as a slow, flowing sequence of images, like leaves drifting down a calm stream. He saw the first cold mist on the dreamwell, the silent ascent into the mountains, the hidden cleft, the breathtaking, sorrowful beauty of the cavern. He felt again the profound empathy for the first keeper, the instinct to play rather than speak, the moment of understanding and release. Each memory was greeted, not with analysis, but with gentle acknowledgement, and then allowed to drift away. He was not reliving the experience. He was letting it settle into the bedrock of who he was. His breathing deepened further, becoming so slow and rhythmic it was almost imperceptible. The sounds of the night, the cottage timbers creaking as they cooled, the distant call of a night bird, the soft snore beginning to emanate from Alara's room, all blended into a soothing, familiar lullaby. His limbs grew heavy, pleasantly immovable. The boundary between his body and the soft bed, between his consciousness and the dreaming world of Eventide, began to soften and blur. He was the keeper, and in this moment of surrender to sleep, he was also simply a part of the valley. He kept returning to the source from which all keepers drew their strength. A final, conscious thought floated through his mind, a simple truth: all is connected, all is well. Then thought dissolved into feeling, and feeling into the warm, boundless, and welcoming dark. Leo's sleep was dreamless and profound, a lake of still, restorative darkness. He did not stir until the first true, gray light of dawn began to seep into his alcove. He awoke not with a start, but with a slow, gentle surfacing, as if rising from the bottom of a deep, peaceful pool. He opened his eyes, feeling a sense of renewal so complete it was as if he had been remade. Every cell in his body felt rested, realigned, and calm. He lay still for a long time, listening. The valley's morning song was pristine, bird song in complex, joyful layers, the whisper of a light breeze through the willow fronds outside his window, the distant lowing of a cow. There was no trace of the hollow silence. He rose, dressed in his simple daily clothes, and stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh, damp with dew. The sky was a clean, pale canvas awaiting the sun's first strokes of pink and gold. He walked into the garden, his feet leaving dark prints on the silver grass. He performed his morning duties, drawing water from the well, feeding the few chickens with a mindful joy. Each task felt sacred in its ordinary simplicity. Alara emerged, and they shared a breakfast of tea, porridge, and honey in companionable silence. Watching the sun finally crest the eastern ridge and flood the valley with light, the new day had begun, not as a reprieve from crisis, but as a beautiful continuation of an endless, gentle vigil. Leo was home. The balance was restored, and his watch, in its quiet, unhurried way, continued.